So, welcome to our video series, What CEOs Learn from Board Roles. And we are delighted to have with us Duncan Penny, recently retired CEO of XP Power, which is a developer and manufacturer of critical power components for the electronics industry. He's also the non-executive director of the Vitec Group, a provider of image capture and content creation solutions. Duncan, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
My pleasure.
Good, thank you. So a few questions about this dual role. You joined the board of Vitec when you'd already been CEO of XP Power for 15 years. How did you feel the NED role really benefited your day job as a CEO?
Yeah, it's when I joined Vitec, it was a bit of trepidation because I was a learner NED, as it were, but I found it really refreshing, and I think I got a lot out of it. I mean, this will sound a bit of a cliche very early on, because not only do you get to see how another board runs, but you get exposed to a lot of other NEDs. And actually, that board had, including myself, 3 serving CEOs on it. So there was a lot of opportunity to do things, outside of a normal NED role in terms of sharing experiences and things like that. The other thing it did for me, it gave me a lot of confidence, because I realized, I know this might be another angle of your questioning, actually, even though they were quite different industries, the challenges were very, very similar. And I found that surprising. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, but, and I was worried about lack of knowledge of the industry. But the other thing that I learned quickly, which I was able to port back to the XP board, is that they had done a really good job of actually joining their strategy up with everything they did. And by that, I mean, they had a clear idea of what they wanted from their different non-execs and how that linked to different aspects of their strategy, which I didn't think we had at XP. So there was that opportunity to immediately pull things back. And in many ways, I think I got more out of being on that board than they got out of me, particularly in the early stages, I have to say.
Good. And you mentioned sort of, being in a different industry, and that surprised you that there were sort of more similarities than differences. Is there anything else that kind of provided any sort of challenges about being in a different sector or a different industry to the one that you're, CEO of?
Yeah, there are bits of it which are very different, which you feel that you can't add very much to the discussion. So, I mean, if I contrast those 2 companies, the way they go to market is very different. So the sales channels are very different. So discussions around that, you don't feel as well equipped. But, every now and then there is a gold nugget that comes out. And this might lead into something else that's very topical on diversity as well, because I think you have to be willing to ask the stupid question, and usually you find they're not so stupid. And some of the non-execs on the XP board who are outside of the industry, they ask questions, and you can see they're quite hesitant to ask them because it's outside of their sphere of knowledge. But they're usually very good questions, and they do set you back, thinking about things a bit differently. So So I think you do need that balance of people from the industry and outside the industry.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so a good blend. So picking up on that diversity point, it's an absolute must-have on the business agenda, of course. What are the differences that you've seen on how D&I is tackled in the boardroom versus the executive group?
Yeah. So this is really from more my XP experience. I guess the board clearly sort of sets policy on diversity quite publicly. My own view is it's actually, when you talk about diversity and inclusion in the workforce, I think the executive directors have got to do it. So my own view is if they're not on board with it and they're not driving it, it's very difficult for the boards. I mean, the board can obviously look at numbers and stats and decide whether things are moving in the right direction. But my own view is it's really, the executives have really got to do it. But the interesting thing about diversity, I think the other, as well as the inclusion and things like that, but I think one of the big benefits of it is there is the real practical benefits. The one I touched on before is that diversity, not just of sort of race and backgrounds and things like that, but of opinion. And, and you get that diversity coming out from having different people on the board from different backgrounds and different industries. And that's one of the real tangible benefits I've seen of diversity. And I've actually seen directors do it be diverse themselves. And there's a really interesting technique that I saw one of the directors on our XP board do, which I try and plagiarize, if you like. But there was a situation with an acquisition where we were presenting it, and that particular Ned was actually arguing every reason why it wasn't a good idea. And after quite a long discussion, it almost sounds like, well, maybe it's not such a good idea. And all of a sudden, they flipped and then put the case for it of why it was a good idea. And actually, what it did, it actually got all the angles of all the different aspects of the pros and cons of it on the table. And it was almost like one person demonstrating diversity in a way. And I've also seen it with we've got a person who's completely outside of the industrial industry on the XP board again, and then we've had discussions around cyber security, which was also very topical, and they've brought really good knowledge from another industry, completely diverse view on it as well, which I found really valuable. Because I think people often, I always think people often, I don't know how to say it without, I have to be careful what I say really, it almost feels like it's diversity for diversity's sake, but actually you can see some real tangible business benefits for it. And I think those are some examples of it.
Yeah, really interesting. So actually you're really watching out for making sure you haven't got that group think.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks. And the other way around, any surprises about the Ned role, given you'd had lots of interactions with the board and your CEO role?
Not really. Not really. The surprise, I guess one thing that did surprise me is the thing I touched on, is I was surprised, maybe I shouldn't have been, how similar the challenges are across different businesses. And a lot of them are, it's how you deal with acquisitions, people, as you might expect. And that was a bit surprising. And in many ways, a bit reassuring as well, I think. But that was one thing that I do remember early on.
So what about when you did take on your first Ned role? What was really important to you? Sort of any advice that you got?
Actually, there was one thing that stuck in my mind, actually, which the chairman told me after they'd offered me the position. And I didn't realise it was such good coaching at the time. But it was almost felt like a throwaway comment, but I think it was a very deliberate comment. And what he said is, he says, what doesn't make a good Ned is coming here and say, well, at, for instance, XP Power, this is the way we do things. And actually, that was really good advice, actually, and good guidance. And I've actually used it the other way around and make sure, it's fine to pull good ideas in, but actually I don't think they want you to stamp, your other company on that company. And I think they were wise words in retrospect.
Yeah. So don't be the CEO of your.
Yes, I mean that's the other thing people say, and I think that's the other people on the board. They don't want you to be an executive, and I think that comes out in the managing COVID and things like that, where things are really happening on the ground really fast. It's not. I don't think it's the Ned's job to manage that. They need to be informed and offer advice, but they can't do the job for you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Very interesting and very insightful. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you.